Chapter 30, Section 2. Searching for Communists on the Homefront. In 1951, the federal government published a pamphlet that listed 100 questions and answers about communism in the United States. Here are 3 examples. What is communism? A system by which one small group seeks to rule the world. What do communists want? To rule your mind and your body from cradle to grave. Where can a communist be found in everyday life? Look for him in your school, your labor union, your church, or your civic club. From 100 Things You Should Know About Communism in the USA, 1951. This publication revealed that the United States fought the Cold War not only against communists in foreign countries, it also fought communism at home. Communists come under suspicion at home. Not all Americans agreed with the government's definition of communism. Some people believed that communism offered a much fairer way of organizing a society than capitalism did. Under communism, everyone would share equally in what society produced. Extremes of wealth and poverty would fade away. The result, supporters maintained, would be a great increase in human happiness. During the Depression, this vision had attracted many followers in the United States. Some had joined the Communist Party. Others became communist sympathizers, or people who believed in communist ideology but did not join the party. By 1950, Communist Party membership in the United States was just 43,000. Still, as the Cold War heated up, so did fears of communist subversion, or plots to overthrow the government and replace it with a communist dictatorship. To calm public anxiety, in 1947, President Truman established the Federal Employee Loyalty Program. It required government employers to take loyalty oaths, or pledges of loyalty to the United States. It also called for background investigations of employees who had possible connections to subversive groups. After 5 million investigations, hundreds of government workers lost their jobs for being potentially disloyal. Several thousand others were forced to resign. Hugh Act hunts for communists in Hollywood and beyond. Meanwhile, Congress began its own investigations. It was led by the House Un-American Activities Committee, or Hugh Act, which had been formed in 1938 to investigate subversive organizations. In 1947, Hugh Act turned its attention to communist influence in the film industry. Large numbers of moving pictures that come out of Hollywood, charged one committee member, carry the communist line. The committee called on writers, actors, and directors to testify about their political beliefs. 10 witnesses refused to answer the committee's questions. Called the Hollywood 10, they argued that the Fifth Amendment gave them the right to refuse to answer on the grounds that their testimony might incriminate them or cause them to look guilty. The committee disagreed and charged them with contempt of Congress, or willful failure to obey authority of Congress. When the House of Representatives voted to convict the Hollywood 10 of that crime, the group issued a joint statement that warned, "The United States can keep its constitutional liberties, or it can keep Hugh Act. It can't keep both." The heads of Hollywood movie studios grew concerned about the impact the Hugh Act investigation would have on their industry. They stated that they would not hire anyone with communist sympathies. To carry out this pledge, they created a blacklist of people thought to be Communist Party members or communist sympathizers. Anyone whose name appeared on this blacklist could no longer find work making films. From the film industry, Hugh Act moved on to other groups. In 1954, it called on labor organizer John Watkins to testify about communist influence in labor unions. When Watkins refused to answer certain questions, Hugh Act convicted him of contempt of Congress. Watkins appealed his convictions, arguing that the Constitution does not give Congress unlimited power to investigate the private lives of citizens. The Supreme Court agreed with him. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice Earl Warren ruled that Congress's powers to investigate must be related to its business of making laws. There is no general authority to expose the private affairs of individuals without justification in terms of the functions of the Congress. Investigations conducted solely for the personal aggrandizement of the investigators or to punish those investigated are indefensible. Watkins v. the United States, 1957. Spy cases raise new fears. Public worries about subversion deepen with news that Americans in important government posts had been charged with working as spies for the Soviet Union. The Alger Hiss case involved a State Department official who had served as an advisor to President Roosevelt at the Yalta Conference. A former communist named Whittaker Chambers accused Hiss of passing secrets to the Soviet Union. In 1950, a federal grand jury convicted Hiss of perjury, or lying under oath. Still, he continued to proclaim his innocence. However, secret documents made public in 1995 indicate that Hiss probably had spied for the Soviet Union. Just as shocking were charges that Americans had helped the Soviet Union test its first atomic bomb in 1949. A year later, a German-born British physicist named Klaus Fuchs confessed that he had spied for the Soviet Union while he was working on the Manhattan Project for Britain during World War II. The information Fuchs passed along to Soviet scientists may well have helped to speed their development of atomic weapons. From Fuchs, a trail of espionage led investigators to Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, whom the United States charged with passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. The Rosenberg trial concluded with a death sentence for both defendants. At the time, many people protested the verdict and sentences, arguing that the evidence against the suspects was inconclusive. Nonetheless, the Rosenbergs were executed in 1953, becoming the only American civilians to be put to death for spying during the Cold War. The rise and fall of Joseph McCarthy. About 2 weeks after Fuchs confessed to spying, Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin was speaking in West Virginia. He asked his audience how communists had been so successful in taking over Eastern Europe and China. The answer, he said, could be found in the traitorous actions of Americans working in high government posts. Then he added, "I have here in my hand a list of 205 names that were made known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party, and who nevertheless are still working and shaping policy in the State Department." McCarthy never produced this list of names, nor did he offer evidence to back up his charges. Still, he launched a crusade against subversives that rapidly gained momentum. Widespread public support for his investigations helped the Republican Party win the control of the Senate in 1952. As a result, McCarthy was named head of the Government Committee on Operations of the Senate. Over the next 2 years, McCarthy used his newfound power to search for subversives. Although he never made a solid case against anyone, his accusations drove some people out of their jobs. For example, under hostile questioning by McCarthy's chief lawyer, Roy Cohn, Army Signal Corps employee Carl Greenblum broke down and cried. As Greenblum collected himself, McCarthy announced, "The witness admits he is lying." Greenblum had admitted no such thing, yet he was still fired. Such reckless persecution of innocent people became known as McCarthyism. Today, this term signifies this practice of publicly accusing someone of subversive activities without evidence to back up the charges. McCarthyism made people even more fearful. Lawmakers refused to enact reforms that might be viewed as moving the country toward communism. Schools asked teachers to sign loyalty oaths, and those who objected to doing so lost their jobs. Citizens became reluctant to speak out about injustices for fear of being labeled subversives. This anxiety was often carried to extremes. When graduate students at a university circulated a petition asking for a vending machine in the physics department, some students refused to sign. They feared having their names on a list with other allegedly radical students. Finally, McCarthy went too far. In 1954, he accused both the Army and President Dwight D. Eisenhower of being soft on communism. In the nationally televised Army MacArthur hearings, spellbound Americans watched as McCarthy's brutal tactics were exposed for all to see. The climax of the hearings came when McCarthy attacked a young man who worked for Joseph Welch, the lawyer who represented the Army. An emotional Welch responded, "Little did I dream you could be so reckless and so cruel as to do an injury to that lad. It is, I regret to say, equally true that I fear he shall always bear a scar needlessly inflicted by you. If it were in my power to forgive you for your reckless cruelty, I would do so. I like to think I'm a gentle man, but your forgiveness will have to come from someone other than me." Joseph Welch, addressing Senator Joseph McCarthy, June 9, 1954. Public opinion quickly turned against McCarthy. Late in 1954, the Senate passed Resolution 301, which censured, or formally scolded, McCarthy for his destructive actions. His behavior, it stated, had tended to bring the Senate into dishonor and disrepute. McCarthy soon faded from the national scene.